Force 13 presents the top 10 storms that refuse to die. A storm that changed category 18 times. A storm that bemused the National Hurricane Center over 89 advisories. And a very patient storm that blew up after waiting for 12 days. Now, there have been many occasions where storm trackers in particular have been looking at storms around the world, and a few days later they check back in and think, oh my goodness, that storm is still there. Well, in some of the more extreme scenarios, tropical cyclones can last for up to, and in one or two occasions even exceeding, a whole month. And we're going to take a look now at some of our favourites, tropical cyclones that simply refuse to die. The first storm on this list is the most recent in our top 10.
Oh, Alfred was a storm and a half. I mean, when it formed, people, especially David and the team, were like going absolutely nuts over it because they were forecasting it to hit Brisbane as a tropical storm.
It's the GFS forecast model then. This is what it's calling for, holding those yellows, that's hurricane force winds, and then gradually weakening, but still, no, maybe a second peak there as well, and a landfall a little bit further south, moving inland and then losing its shape very quickly. So with those earlier forecasts heading closer towards Townsville and Mackay, the storm formed on February 22nd and was moving easterly at first, and then decided to start to turn towards the south, but only very slowly as it strengthened, and it ended up reaching its peak intensity later on towards the end of the month there, reaching category 3 status as it was moving southwards. That's on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And then as we entered March, the storm continued southerly but very slowly, and then lost its tropical characteristics, then gained them back again just a couple of days later, losing it again, and then gaining it back much later as it got closer to the Australian coast.
And I think we were live for it on March the 6th. And I remember just every 10 minutes the storm would jog to the east and then to the west, and it just keep doing these tiny jogs.
The storm finally made up its mind, and against the odds of cool sea surface temperatures, it did hold on to tropical characteristics just enough to make landfall as a tropical entity just north of Brisbane.
And eventually the storm got in line with Brisbane's latitude, and it just stopped. And I think that around then was when it lost tropical cyclone status, like some point around then. But then after it just stopped, it started moving towards the Australian coast, straight for Brisbane, and it was quite interesting because we had lots of people, especially David on the team, going crazy about it. When it reached Brisbane, it was like completely almost gone. It was like fading out, it was barely a TC. It was completely gave out by then, and that was when it kicked the bucket over land and died.
This was Force 13's landfall graphic showing that the storm still had 45 mph winds as it arrived north of Brisbane. That's around 70 to 75 kilometers per hour sustained. Alfred will be remembered for its wacky track and for making everyone keep guessing where its final destination was going to be. Of course, at some point, some models still had it going out to sea until it did that final turn. Among the crazy activity in the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is a storm that some people might forget. However, it was somewhat interesting in terms of its longevity and its erratic track. Well, at first, Hurricane Paulette started out pretty normally over the open Atlantic Ocean as a tropical storm for a few days before it managed to strengthen as it got closer to Bermuda. It gave the island a direct hit as it was starting to recurve towards the north and then the northeast, peaking as a Category 2. Usually that's that for tropical cyclones. They turn post-tropical. Well, Paulette did, but then more things happened after that.
Then you think the storm's done. Usually the storm would be over, but no, it wasn't over. Paulette had other plans. It decided to head more towards the southeast as it approached Iberia, and after a bit of stalling, and trying its best to formed again.
I think the most surprising part was that deep dive southwards that is an extratropical cyclone. It kept a storm force wind field all the while, and then it was stalling around. It was, as you can see, erratically moving, then became a tropical storm again, heading towards Madeira, and then it became a low pressure remnant, still with storm force winds for a few more days, lasting almost till the end of the month. It kept going, and then it died off. Well, in the end, a solitary fatality from this storm, Paulette, so certainly not much to write home about on that one, with some satellite views of the storm there as it was affecting Bermuda. Recon planes were also in Hurricane Paulette as it caused $50 million in damages along its long trek.
It was meant to intensify to a major hurricane. I think it was really early on in the cone. It never did that, but still quite an interesting storm for its erratic track.
And now the storm that almost had everything. In the Western Pacific, it was still early on in the season. It was July. We don't usually get very powerful storms in this part of the year, but sometimes it does happen, and it's Typhoon Rita that decided it would become a Category 5, reaching wind speeds of 165 miles per hour and an estimated pressure of 9-10 millibars, thankfully far away from any land areas. Well, it started to weaken and it became a massive headache for everyone involved, not just for track but also for intensity. It drops to Cat 1, it goes back to Cat 2, back down to Cat 1 again, and swirls for a little bit longer, moving northwards, just passing the Daito Islands back to Category 2 status, then back down to 1, then up to a 2, then down to a 1, and then passing the Amami Islands into the East China Sea. Guess what it does next? It becomes a Category 2 again, and goes southwards in the East China Sea, not far from Miyako. Even I'm getting confused. Then it passes Okinawa, moves off northwards, speeds up, and then it heads towards the coast of China, where it does make landfall, still with winds of 75 miles per hour. It was the strongest and the deadliest storm of the 1972 Pacific typhoon season, and looked awfully photogenic on satellite imagery as well, at least the quality that they had back then. Certainly looked good near its peak intensity, and on a small side actually. Rita was a significant ace producer with 58.4 units and lasted 468 hours as a tropical cyclone. It did kill 377 and did cause significant damage in terms of buildings damaged, 50,000, which is the 185th highest. In monetary damages, it's 445 million, which was still in the top 10 easily in terms of most damaging storms in the Western Pacific at that point in time.
Hurricane Nadine was a really long-lived hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean. What I do remember of Nadine was 2012 season was like a really interesting season, and Nadine definitely kept all the sights, all the views, because the storm refused to die. And was basically circling around the northeastern side of the Atlantic Ocean, nearby the Azores Islands and nearby Morocco and Hispaniola, the Iberian Peninsula. And yeah, I mean, this storm was really interesting because basically it defied every kind of odds. I mean, in any meteorological manners. Back on the day, the sea surface temperatures, yeah, were quite hot, but when Nadine also became like a subtropical, or reformed as a subtropical storm, basically was moving all around the places and looking really great and strong on some days. And basically it lasted for about like 25 days or so, or even more, 26 or 27, something like that. But definitely Nadine was like one of the first storms that I properly tracked officially. I became tracking storms in 2010, but 2011, 2012 it was like the season where I started to properly tracking storms, and Nadine definitely caught my eye by how rare the storm was, and given the context of the 2012 season, that it was quite active, but basically many of the storms, or almost all the storms, were quite weak. But yeah, Nadine was something really interesting to see, one of the most interesting storms I ever seen in the recent history.
There was the track of it. It had a peak wind speed of 90 miles per hour and a pressure peak of 978 millibars. From start to finish, 500 hours. Take a look at the wind field of Nadine as it involved as well, looking at the first part of its track, where it looked, in my opinion, the best when it peaked the first time as a Category 1. Then it lost hurricane status. It's out over the open ocean here. Now it's scooting towards the Azores. The wind field did reach the Azores the first time around, so they did get a double dose of tropical storm force winds. Turned post-tropical there for a little while. It retained those winds, however, and then it came back from the dead. They were expecting it, or they weren't too surprised that it actually returned for the second coming of Nadine, and then it maybe a little bit more surprising, it actually became a hurricane again that second time. I was certainly surprised back then when we did our, I think, 11 or 12 updates on Nadine on Force 13, of course still quite early on in our days back then. I think it was a record at that point for the amount of updates we'd done on a single storm. Even in days long gone by, there were still storms that refused to die. This was the historic Ciriaco Hurricane in August 1899. Strengthening rapidly in the end as it approached the Caribbean, passing through Guadeloupe as a Category 4 and then making landfall in Puerto Rico near the same intensity. This storm peaked with winds of 150 miles per hour and devastated Puerto Rico, as a matter of fact, and also caused significant damages on those other islands as it's going through the Bahamas on this graphic right now, passing through and then recurving northwards and then northeastwards. The US southeast coast there got a close pass, but it didn't arrive. Then did something really strange. It decided to turn just like that. A 90-degree turn, a Category 3 landfall on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and then back out on a recurvature path again to Category 1 status. Now, usually, storms are gone by this point. Extratropical, that's that. But the Ciriaco Hurricane had other plans. It kept going slowly towards the southeast and then towards the east, and eventually became a tropical storm again as it was doing a little bit of a meander, really, although you can't see it on this zoomed in view. Eventually it was just quite far off the coast of Newfoundland, and then it was moving on towards the Azores, still as a tropical storm this whole period, mainly because we don't know exactly how strong it was at this point. But there it is, bending past the Azores, becoming a hurricane again there as it was passing in between the islands quite handily and then continuing off towards the northeast. 672 hours and an ACE estimate of 75. It was a very deadly storm as well, look at that, over 4,000 fatalities, which ranks pretty high in the Atlantic. 30,000 buildings damaged and nearly 1,500 destroyed. All of those numbers in the top 300. In terms of damages, monetary damages, of course, 20 million, not that much in today's money, but of course back then in 1899, quite a lot. 1,400 additionally were injured. It was a major disaster in the region. If there's one storm that produced more National Hurricane Center advisories than Nadine, you'd be quite surprised possibly to find that it was actually Hurricane Kyle that had one more advisory, notching the number up to 89 from the National Hurricane Center, who were thoroughly bemused by this storm's antics. Well, at first it reached Category 1 hurricane status from a subtropical area in the Sargasso Sea, really, passing south of Bermuda, then moving northwards towards the island, weakening almost all the way, yes, back to tropical depression status, then strengthening back to tropical storm status, doesn't really know what it wants to do. Is it going to be pulled northwards? Is it going to be hemmed in and stay further south? Well, eventually it started to move northwestwards. Now it's west of Bermuda, back to a depression, back to a tropical storm, still hovering around the area, still wasn't collected by any troughs that were further north or other systems, so it drops back down again to a depression, and then towards the US East Coast, where it strengthens once again. Tropical storm landfalls on the US East Coast there, passing Charleston and Wilmington. This storm peaked with 85 mph winds and a pressure estimate of 980 millibars, as we saw there. And at the start it had quite a substantial wind field as well, as you can see, although once it equalized, those wind fields gradually decreased. Then it started to recover again, and those wind fields got a fair bit larger as it became a hurricane. So whilst it certainly wasn't the most impressive storm that refused to die, it did absolutely do just that. It really didn't know where it was going. There were systems going by to its left, to its north, that were trying to pick it up, but Kyle just stayed there. It refused to budge, and it kept drifting and sinking again as more systems passed by, and then eventually Kyle went on towards the US East Coast. It delivered a fair bit of rain there as well at times along the coastline of the eastern seaboard. Quite a pathetic storm by the time it reached the coast, and a tiny wind field mainly on sea-facing parts of the storm, out towards its east. No fatalities, only 128 buildings damaged and 7 buildings reported destroyed from Kyle. Pretty much as you would expect. In terms of monetary damages, it amounted to just 5 million and 8 injured along the path of Kyle on the US East Coast. One of the first rules of storm tracking in the Atlantic always used to be that storms just don't get anywhere near Europe. Even so, Leslie did turn post-tropical before it did strike the coast of Portugal. However, it still had a lot of energy left, and it had only just turned post-tropical by the time it got there. But let's rewind a little bit and take a look at how Leslie actually formed. Well, it formed from a non-tropical origin, extratropical, then became a subtropical storm. This is out in the North Atlantic, then down to a depression, then post-tropical again. Moving up towards the Azores, you just saw them on the right-hand side of the image, so it's off towards the west of the Azores over the open North Atlantic, back to a subtropical storm. Then it finally becomes tropical on the 30th of September, and then it's still hovering all around the place and doing loops and all kinds of other things. It's heading towards Bermuda now, then it drifts southwards, then it turns back towards the west-northwest, then north, Category 1 status for a while, and then it's still sauntering around that area. We're finally figuring out it's time to go east again, as it does, and then continuing slowly back towards the Azores during the second week of October now as we find ourselves. By the 10th it reached Category 1 status again, reaching another peak. And then off it goes, straight towards the northeast now, towards Portugal, slam as an extratropical cyclone just south of Porto. It peaked with winds of 90 miles per hour and a pressure of 969 millibars, and it lasted for over 400 hours. Certainly in the middle part of its life, Leslie was forgotten because Hurricane Michael formed and did what it did in the United States, a Category 5. Let's watch again this progression of the early part of Leslie as it was really struggling to get tropicality going. And you can see here it was just a hubbub of thunderstorms. It almost got pushed away completely, but it eventually came back. It nearly lost it, but eventually there it goes, starting to swirl in again, and eventually becomes a fully fledged tropical cyclone. A storm that had tenacity, a storm that didn't give up, and certainly looked quite impressive at its first Category 1 peak down towards Bermuda. Later on in its life, of course, the wind field expanded quite rigorously, and here it went off towards the northeast again, the second Category 1 peak now, and you can see how the storm continued with quite a large wind field. Didn't quite reach the Azores. It was the western side that had all of the winds by the time it arrived in Portugal. It was quite impactful when it did reach the Iberian Peninsula. 17 fatalities, 5,000 buildings damaged and over 500 destroyed. In addition, monetary damages amounted to $480 million, which is in the top 300 worldwide, and 91 were injured by the storm's passage.
Leon-Eline was a storm that is very notable for making landfall in Mozambique. Not many storms are known to do that and then move inland.
It's a storm that first started off the coast of Indonesia in the Australian region in early February 2000. The storm then started to move past Christmas Island, became a tropical storm at that point, depression until then, and then drifted southwards actually to a Category 1, and then it started to get hooked on a more westerly heading, and that led this system to travel across the whole Indian Ocean, a fairly rare feat, although quite weakened for a while there as a tropical storm hanging on in the face of adversity, strong wind shear, and then continued to reach the Mascarene Islands eventually, passing close to St. Brandon and then passing north of Mauritius as a strengthening tropical storm, passing Réunion Island there as well, and then to Category 1 status as it approached Madagascar, making a potent Category 2 landfall. Well, it weakened after that to a depression, then was back over the Mozambique Channel where conditions were favourable for further strengthening, and it did go almost all the way, getting up to Category 4 status before making landfall just south of Beira in Mozambique.
One thing to note about the storm that I would like to address is it actually didn't stop in Mozambique. Like, yes, the tropical side of it stopped, but it remained as a remnant low all the way to southern Namibia, which is extremely rare for cyclones from the Southwest Indian Ocean. It caused some of the largest rains that we saw in southern Namibia, which realized is a semi-desert region, since 1976, and in the top 3 for the last couple of years. Definitely a very interesting storm. I know that I think those areas are becoming drier nowadays, so I don't know if we'll see much storms like that again. But definitely less of an influence from the mountains there, the Great Escarpment of South Africa. Especially since there was a tropical depression that came pretty much a few weeks before, which invigorated the damage. So that definitely caused some increase in the impact.
Leon-Eline reached its absolute peak just before landfall and looked very impressive for it. The storm could have been stronger. In total, it caused 181 fatalities, damaged 8,000 buildings and destroyed 14,000. The storm lasted for over 400 hours as well and produced 25 units of ACE. In monetary damages, $580 million in damages, which is very high for the region, and 503 millimeters of rainfall, the highest recorded from the storm's passage.
Horrible name. Well, yeah, but we cannot say horrible on how the storm looked like. It was a beautiful Category 5 hurricane typhoon. Typhoon officially because it became a Category 5 right after it crossed the international date line.
This storm started off as a meager low in the eastern Pacific, which then strengthened to become Tropical Storm Genevieve. A few days later, had weakened to become Remnant Low Genevieve, and then back to Tropical Storm Genevieve, and then back to Remnant Low Genevieve as it entered the Central Pacific. And then it regained Tropical Storm status not long after, so it got its powers back.
Genevieve took a good while to actually develop though. It took 12 days for the system to actually acquire tropical storm status properly before it actually got stronger. It did reach hurricane status just before reaching the international dateline and then propelled itself to Category 5 status after it crossed into the Western Pacific.
And it lasted quite a lot of days as well, and remained as a really strong typhoon for many days as well. So basically Genevieve as well defied kind of some meteorological laws as well, because it moved to the west and to the north as well, and those particular locations, the sea surface temperatures in the Central Pacific or in the eastern side of the Western Pacific Basin are not that hot, and really there's not like too much room for a storm to intensify that much as Genevieve did.
Genevieve near its peak looked amazing. It really came back strong from its weak past in the Eastern Pacific, and I think it's very beautiful. That storm, it completely blew up and had some really nice cloud tops around it. Had a really nice. It was just really nice. I actually like that storm.
Despite all of its power, Genevieve remained over 700 miles away from any land areas, and so no impacts were thankfully recorded. It was a strong Category 5 and one of the strongest storms of 2014.
Genevieve! That's up.
Cyclone Freddy was a really rare and probably once in a lifetime storm, especially with all the records it broke and just how much distance it traveled and how many people it affected.
Cyclone Freddy started off in the Australian region, and I was fairly new to the team around then. I'd only been in the team for about 3 or 4 months. But we started tracking the storm as it formed. It, like most storms that season, went straight up to Category 4 status almost immediately. I think it got to Category 2 first, and then had a second peak as Category 4 as it was leaving the basin into the Ciriaco.
I mean, I don't know how I can start talking about this impressive storm. Beautiful, monstrous, really rare, devastating, everything, all the adjectives you can call the storm was Freddy. The storm really defied everything in the meteorological terms.
Once it got into the Southwest Indian Ocean, it was headed directly for Madagascar, and it had a whole amount of ocean ahead of it. Really favourable conditions too, so that's when the team started to grasp the storm a bit more, and we produced many live streams on the storm as well, including a live stream during its peak intensity, which was just into Category 5 status on the 19th of February.
Has just clinched, at last, Category 5 status. That's the top story this hour as we monitor the storm's approach towards Mauritius and La Réunion, and eventually Madagascar.
And really a beautiful storm as well. During its peak intensity was basically like a donut. It was like it got like annular characteristics, so basically it was also a really beautiful storm to see. But yeah, I mean, it record-breaking.
When you can see, like on satellite imagery and stuff, how the distance it traveled to get to its peak off the coast of, what was it? It was just a couple 100 kilometers out from Rodriguez, or one of those islands.
Freddy continued to march on past the Mascarene Islands and into the coast of Madagascar, still as a Category 2. It then weakened substantially down to a weak tropical storm, then to a depression briefly, then back to a storm, and strengthened to a Category 1 again before making landfall in Mozambique. Well, most people thought that would have been the end of it. It survived as a depression for a good while inland and became a remnant low. Surely that's that, right? And then eventually it came back out over the Mozambique Channel and developed once again.
It came back to life, it died and intensified a lot of times and weakened a lot of times as well, actually.
And started heading southward and then went up towards Mozambique once again. Once again as a Category 2, I think this time. And then when caused a lot of inland damage there as well. I mean, Mozambique and Malawi were like really struggling from the storm and needed a lot of aid as well, because it just stalled around the same area for so long, even as a remnant low when it was inland, and that couldn't have been good for like crops and farmers and stuff, especially in the region. And the storm even caused effects in like South Africa,
and it brought so much it brought actually quite a bit of devastation to sub-Saharan Africa, and it has probably been one of the most interesting like storms that I've seen in my career, especially when it did its turn in the Mozambique Channel, which I think no one was expecting.
And one thing that's notable about Freddy, which everyone would know by this point, is its huge accumulated cyclone energy unit number. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was like 70 something. It was ridiculous. And its incredibly long track caused the storm to take John from 1994 off the podium, off the top of the podium, and replace it with Freddy for the longest lasting tropical cyclone ever in recorded history. So that was quite an interesting storm to track, especially being in the team.
So in the end, the statistics from Freddy: 1,234 fatalities, one of the deadliest storms in the Southwest Indian Ocean. 93,000 buildings damaged and 132,000 destroyed, that latter stat being in the top 50 for world storms. In monetary damages, it's 600 million expected damages in terms of monetary value, and 1,000 millimeters of rainfall fell from Freddy, as you'd expect.
Freddy was definitely a storm that I think many people are going to remember for years to come.
Basically, Freddy was something that is going to stay on the history books for centuries, I would say.
That concludes the top 10 storms that refuse to die. And now let's recap the top 10. Cyclone Alfred, 2025. Hurricane Paulette in 2020. Typhoon Rita in 1972. Hurricane Nadine in 2012. The Ciriaco Hurricane in 1899. Hurricane Kyle in 2002. Hurricane Leslie in 2018. Cyclone Leon-Eline in 2000. Hurricane/Typhoon Genevieve in 2014. And at number 1, Cyclone Freddy in 2023.